Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. You have joined us for another week of finding interesting people who are making a difference in the lives of others and their communities, locally, globally, and digitally. And you are doing so with our Rotary Club. Rotary is an organization of 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors around the world, all of whom are interested in this service above self thing that we use to organize our thinking about how to be useful in our communities, how to be helpful, how to help those in need, how to help those who need hope, all of these kinds of questions. And so for our club, we look for people who have these kind of innovative and interesting ways of addressing challenges. And today we've got with us Theo Hooker, and he is one of the co-founders, he's also the COO of Cambium Carbon. And we are going to hear more about that from him. You read more about his bio, or I hope you read more about his bio before you got to this part of our meeting page where the video is embedded. If you are watching this on YouTube, just scroll down a little bit and you can find his bio there as well. But I will now hand it over to Theo so that we can get the cool story about the work they are doing. Theo, thank you very much for joining us at the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley.
Roshan, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here and share a little bit about what we're doing at Cambium Carbon. And I'll jump right in. So the theme today, giving wood waste a second life. What does that actually mean? If global shipping was a country, it would be the 6th largest greenhouse gas emitter. And now that just doesn't factor in wood. That factors in every piece of material, object, product that is shipped to get, from a raw source extraction to a production facility to your home or to the shop in some capacity. We do a lot of that across the world. We ship a lot of things and we move a lot of goods. In particular, the wood supply chain is particularly inefficient. So trees are cut down in some forest and shipped to usually another country, another place to be processed. Some of that can be in the same continent, like in North America, but then usually shipped to a place where there's cheaper labor or more affordable labor to be turned into goods, and then shipped back to that original destination, like here in the US at least, and then sold as a final product. To put that into some more context, the US leads global furniture imports, $54 billion in 2020. 78% of US wood household furniture is imported. And 81% of that comes from China or Vietnam alone. So those are a lot of numbers, but the main fact there is we do a lot of importing of furniture. And that's all types of furniture, and wood makes up a portion of that. But we spend a lot of money moving a lot of goods to get to our homes here in the US. While that is all happening, right here in the US, 36 million trees fall in US urban areas. So that's in cities, metro areas, just around cities. That is around 46 million tons of material. And not only do we spend money to plant those trees, maintain those trees, we also spend a lot of money getting rid of them. So overall, almost $1 billion of resources and value spent to move that material once it falls down. So as it stands right now, we have this big resource that is treated and viewed as a massive liability. It is a logistic problem, it is a resource problem, and because of that, a lot of it goes to waste. Those 36 million trees are either chipped and turned into wood chips or mulch, or tossed into a landfill, or in some cases, burned, because it's the easiest thing to do, and that's when the incentives are aligned for people to get rid of that material as quickly as possible. Just for context, this is a picture from a sort yard in Baltimore, Maryland, where we do a lot of our work. They harness about 10% of the material that comes out of Baltimore City, and there are piles like this stretching for hundreds and hundreds of yards. So they're just accessing a small material, and there are sort yards like this around the country that are just sitting with wood. We have to do better. This material is not only wasted, but the production and the consumption system that we have built to move the environmental and social impacts of our production and consumption to developing countries and other parts of the world is not sustainable by any means of the imagination. So that's where Cambium comes in. Wood reuse can be a massive solution to a number of different pieces, not only diverting waste, but creating local jobs and creating socially regenerative circular economies in cities. And on the tail end of our work is tree planting as well. So those 36 million trees that I just mentioned can turn into 3 to 4 billion board feet. So board foot is sort of the volumetric measurement of wood. So it's one board foot is 12 inches wide, 12 inches long, and 1 inch deep. That's a lot of material that we can use. You can imagine your coffee table might have 10 to 15 board feet of wood in it, depending on its size. So there's a lot of viable material out there that can be used. So at Cambium, we are imagining and actively creating a local regenerative wood supply chain, or in fact, local regenerative wood supply chains, plural. And imagine that across the country, you could have the source of material, the production and processing of material, and the end use of that material all stay within one locality, one city, one municipality. And like I mentioned earlier, so 15% of all of our profits are reinvested back into local tree planting and maintenance. And that is only one aspect or another aspect of how we create this regenerative circular system in those areas. And so we work with arborists and tree service companies to remove that material, local sawmills and manufacturing operations to process that material, and then local buyers to implement, architectural objects like flooring and ceilings, accent walls, furniture, wooden tables, wooden, you name it. We work basically in non-structural elements of buildings. And how are we doing that? Carbon Smart Wood. Carbon Smart Wood is the brand and the material class that we are building this around, and that diverts waste, creates jobs, and plants trees. And the Carbon Smart Wood, and all of that is tracked through our internal inventory platform. So we have that proof and chain of custody behind all that. How are we scaling that across the country? So the Carbon Smart Wood Challenge is a way to connect each player in this sort of system and network that all touch urban wood in some capacity. So we work with cities to figure out how we can create wood reuse systems. What's the necessary infrastructure? What's the job training strategy and curriculum needed? We work with companies to bring them in and understand how they can use this material and integrate it into their supply chain. And then we work with the local suppliers to build the network, build the operations and the infrastructure necessary to harness that material and actually turn it into a scalable material alternative for those companies. Just highlighting that impact alone, and 250 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year may not mean much to some folks. That's about half of the emissions of all automobiles driven across the US each year. So this is not by all means a silver bullet approach, but it can produce a meaningful impact in not just carbon, but some of those other holistic elements that I mentioned: social impact, job creation, waste reduction, all those pieces. And how do we measure that impact? First is the carbon storage in those wood products. So when that tree falls down, it is holding carbon, it is sequestering carbon. As that decays or is off-gassing in a landfill, that carbon is released into the atmosphere. or when it is turned into mulch and decomposes, part of that goes into the atmosphere. So locking that in a solid wood product is a form of carbon storage and slowing the carbon cycle. Next is the avoided transportation emissions. So instead of transporting material from one forest to a production facility and across the other side of the world and then transporting it back, we shorten those supply chains. And then the third piece is that tree planting. So we estimate how many, based on the product size and the project, we can plant a certain number of trees. And those trees have a certain lifetime value of carbon that we hope we invest in the maintenance, the planting, et cetera, to make that possible. And I'll finish with our friendly friend, the Lorax. If we're not fighting for the trees, who will? And that's sort of the ethos behind what we're doing at Cambium, to create a local regenerative alternative to the way of life and current systems we have in place today. But thanks so much, and excited to jump in to some questions.
Cool, Theo. Thank you very much. Let's introduce the group we've got real quick. Viewers, you've already met Theo. My name is Rushton Hurley. I am the programs chair for the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. And we also have with us here in the Bay Area, Shagrin, our paella master. And yes, that's a cool thing to be. So Theo, I got a whole list of questions for you, and Shags and I will pepper you with them via the chat or just letting us know either way. So I'm going to start with, when we think about the wood that is from fallen trees or whatever, is there a difference in the quality of the wood that you get through these kinds of processes as compared to what general logging might do?
Absolutely. Great question. And short answer is yes, there is a difference. And we think of it sort of like the ugly produce or the misfits produce of lumber. That this is material that looks a little bit different, that may be a little bit harder to process, but fundamentally it is beautiful material that tells an amazing story. And so what the traditional lumber industry might call a defect, we call character. That a different grain pattern in the wood, as opposed to a very straight, very consistent material you might get out of a traditional lumber mill, that tells a story. That's a little bit of uniqueness in our products. And we like to say that every piece is totally unique. Obviously, every piece of wood anywhere is totally unique. But I think we have gotten to expect in our society a level of consistency and immediacy in everything that we buy that isn't actually natural in a lot of ways. And so we try to work with the natural, what Mother Nature gives us, and tell an amazing story. But there is definitely a difference there.
All right. So, question that kind of came in on this: if we're thinking about the fact that loads and loads of wood is just kind of present locally through these kinds of things you described, the picture in Baltimore is eye-opening, right? And thinking about it in terms of the not as pretty produce kind of situation, is that the innovation, or just essentially a recognition about wood that makes this a working system, or are there other innovations that essentially allow you to do this so that it makes sense to people? Which is another way of just asking, why hasn't this been done before?
Totally. We like to joke internally within our team that the idea of using local wood is not an innovative concept, right? Using materials in your backyard is how civilizations began, right? And so there has been, any city you go to across the country, at least in the US, will have some sort of custom shop, right? A wood shop or a crafts person who is using this local material in a certain capacity. But they're usually using a very small percentage. And for some reason, the wood industry, or lumber in particular, has not undergone the same level of scrutiny as sort of the food or textiles, for example. That you want to know where your food came from. You want to know, when you go to a farmer's market, you get that feeling of buying something that you might pay a little bit extra, but it's directed towards a local initiative, a local farmer, a local family in some capacity. And so there hasn't really been that level of engagement or organization across what we call the urban wood industry, which is not a big world to begin with, but there hasn't been that sort of collective energy and effort to elevate this material to that same level. So I guess there's a few answers to your question. One is that side of things, just organization and putting this material into the public awareness, just like food and textiles might be or have become in a lot of ways. The next piece is technology. So we work in an industry that, aside from the electric saw, hasn't seen a widespread adoption of a technology to enhance or make the business or operations more effective. So at Cambium, we have our own internal or proprietary software called Trace, which acts not only as a tracking or a tracing software tool, so that when that tree falls down in your backyard and an arborist comes to take it away, we can track it from where it stood to the local sawmill that it goes to be processed, to the desk that it gets turned into at the office, down the road or something like that, or maybe even back into your home. But even within that, it's a process management tool as well. So when that tree falls down, it can tell you, okay, based on the species, the width, and the size, we should turn that into flooring, or we should mill that into insert product based on the data and understanding that we have. So we work with, there's over about 100 sawmills across the country that use our software to track material, inform their process, and run more effectively. And we're building and iterating that every day. But that is an innovation that we hope and believe will help not only move the movement forward through the traceability, through the awareness there, but also just make the process more efficient. So it's not just a custom material. We can actually get higher volume lumber out of these operations as well. And then the third piece I'll mention is just infrastructure, that the lumber industry broadly has invested in massive capacity, massive engineering and machines to be able to process at scale. The urban wood world, because it is made up of these small scale players, hasn't really seen that investment in infrastructure. So those three avenues kind of all together tie into that.
So if we look at the story you're telling, the story you're telling starts with wood falling down somewhere locally. It becomes possible to move that locally to local people who work with these things, and then those resulting products become something that might be interesting locally to people who want to be able to say, hey, this is from local trees. Which parts of that process is Cambium Carbon directly involved with? Because I imagine that you quite rightly tell the entire story to give people the picture, but some of those pieces are not your pieces, right? You guys aren't out making desks.
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
So we have so in the full time or spectrum, from the moment a tree falls down to product gets delivered to a home, we are not out there removing those trees. Arborists and tree service companies are doing that. We want to basically wave the flag and say, hey, over here, you can, if it meets these sort of requirements that we have, we'll take that material. We own and operate our own sawmill and fabrication shop in Baltimore, Maryland. So that is sort of our R&D facility that we can understand which species work well for which products. How do you dry a certain species in a certain climate to produce the best, most sustainable and durable material? Develop the standard operating procedures across the timeline that we can start to replicate across the country with our other partner sawmills. So in that area, in that region, we do actually mill, saw, dry, create products there. But we work across the country with other sawmills basically to bring them and connect them to these larger orders to create recurring sustainable demand on that side. So one of our big focuses on that demand generation, people, getting people aware of this material, how they can use it, talking to architects, builders, construction companies, furniture manufacturers, flooring companies, anyone who uses wood sort of in that space could have a local sustainable alternative. And that's where our big focus is to help them understand how they can use it.
All right, cool. And another question about kind of that overall story is if we're looking at what represents wood waste, right? So in thinking about your slides, you talk a bit about sort of wood chips and mulching, and then you talk also about like landfill and burning. I totally get that wood that ends up in a landfill or is burned is wasted wood. Is what goes into wood chips and mulching wasted really, or is that just kind of an underutilization of the resource?
Great question. We were giving a presentation about a year ago now, and similarly, a man stood up and asked a question, and it was a little bit confrontational. He was like, "What do you have against wood chips?" And we were like, "No, we don't have anything against wood chips. Our point is that I think we have enough wood chips." So to your point, mulch is incredibly important to protect the soil, to add a layer of ground cover in certain applications, like certainly better than, paving over a surface and just having it be asphalt or concrete or something like that. So we see the value of wood chips, but to your point, there is a large majority that is a underutilized resource that is a beauty, could be a beautiful table, could be a beautiful product that just ends up as wood chips.
Cool. Shags notes in the chat that the examples of the reuse on your website are really kind of cool to look at. And so just a reminder to people watching this video, whether you are on our meeting page or on the YouTube page, the link to Cambium Carbon, CAMBIUM carbon.com is on both of these pages near the embedded video. So let's kind of think in terms of where savings happens, right? Because if we're talking about this as a sustainable innovation in products that has measurable effects on the environment, then a lot of this probably comes down to the shipping, which is, I assume, why you started the presentation talking about that. But is that 50%, 80% of kind of the savings? Are there other kind of really big pieces that in telling the story in a focused way I didn't give you time to go into? So talk a little bit more about the nature of the savings.
Yeah. So you can kind of think about it, where we are now and where we want to be. So as I mentioned, the investment in the awareness, the technology, and the infrastructure in the urban wood world is just getting started. We've made a lot of progress, and there are a lot of other fantastic groups and organizations that have created this group that is ready, or the industry that is ready to take this step forward. But in the cost saving side of things, you can imagine a massive sawmill operation that they have the machinery and their own operations dialed in. So even if they are spending extra money on the transport side of things, they make up that on the just efficiency and economies of scale. On our side of things, we have fewer or less of that transport costs side of things, but the operations are still a little bit intensive, and we haven't hit the necessary economies of scale in certain applications yet to make that dramatically, more cost effective on the, at the end of the day. And so to your point of the question, how do we make this to be truly sustainable? It has to be cost competitive in some capacity. And so that's where we're working on those avenues. So on the operations front, what machinery, what infrastructure do we need to invest in to reduce that board foot cost by 20% or something like that? On the technology side, how can we use that to make our operations more efficient. So we're playing with all these levers to get to that point. And right now, even some cases we come in under budget of a project as compared to another alternative. Some cases we come above budget, and that's sort of we want to lower and decrease that range of fluctuation on those products.
Okay, cool. So I mean that's a good insight, onto or into where the development of the innovation is. That's it's a big interest for our audience.
Yeah.
Does that also represent the biggest challenge you face right now, or is there something else that for the work of Cambium Carbon, there's just another thing out there that is, man, if we could solve that, this would accelerate in really amazing ways.
Yeah, I think it does. It focuses on the two ends, I guess, generally sort of supply and demand. That we are, and it's a bit of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, as well. So that on the supply side, all those elements that we were talking about, the infrastructure needs, the technology needs, how do we actually increase the capacity of sawmills across the country to level up the industry and level up this material class? Then on the sales and demand side, it's how do we get more people aware of this material? And in a lot of cases, and particularly in the built environment or the furniture manufacturing world, it takes a lot of time to introduce a new material, introduce a new product into a supply chain or into an operation. So that's really what we need to find, and that's our big challenge now, is finding the right folks to talk to, the furniture manufacturers who want a local sustainable alternative and are really committed to making that happen. The secondary manufacturers like your flooring company or your millwork company that wants to integrate this local material and really work with them to set up that process. And so that's unfortunately it's something that just takes time, but it's sort of a nature of the industry. So I'd say those are the two big challenges: the elevating the demand and getting into the right rooms to have those conversations with folks, and then lifting up supply to then meet that demand as it grows.
All right. And so in the space of elevating demand, do you find that in working with local sawmills, you're bringing to the table an ability to tell the story and effectively a marketing message about what reused wood can end up being? So you're helping them on a front where they might have to sink a lot of money into how they tell their story, but you've already got that prepared for them. Is that accurate?
That's certainly the value that we want to bring. And I think we have demonstrated so far is that they are, these business owners, they're heads down. They're running a complex business with a lot of moving parts. If we can make it easier for them to sell a recurring, consistent product, so they don't have to, switch between running the sawmill or taking wood out of the kiln and generating sales, I think that's a win for them. It's a win for us, and the overall movement. But to your point, and one of your early questions of why hasn't this happened, this connection between urban wood reuse as a meaningful climate mitigation strategy that link has not been made to its fullest extent. And that's where we want to and have been putting a lot of resources, connecting wood reuse to carbon metrics, wood reuse to carbon storage, the social impacts, the circular economy side of things. That story hasn't quite been told at scale yet. And so that's definitely where we put a lot of energy and focus.
All right. Well, let's get one more piece of the Q&A in front of you. Cambium, the word. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So the cambium layer is a cellular layer within a tree, basically between the wood and the bark, that is responsible for turning nutrients into growth. So it's basically the growth layer. And that is kind of what we see ourselves as across this industry. So, why hasn't this happened before? This industry is full of a lot of independent, disparate parts, cities, buyers, suppliers, and we really see ourselves as that connective layer to grow the industry, grow the movement, and create some systematic change.
Well, I love the innovation alongside a particular focus. As Rotary has 7 areas of focus. It used to be 6, but then they added protecting the environment, and this actually hits upon that and several others of those areas as well. We'll wind things down. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us to watch this recording. Just a reminder to our members and those on our friends list, you are always welcome, once you see that email coming from me that says we've got a recording coming up, to join in, because we get the chance to talk to these people, both as part of the recording and afterward, when time of everyone allows. But we do ask you to do a couple of things for us. If you are on our SiliconValleyRotary.com page, you can scroll down just a little farther, and there is an attendance piece. And if you fill that out, it helps us just kind of have a sense of our reach. But it also means that if you are a Rotarian and you're wanting to say, hey, I made up a miss, then you can do that via the automatically generated email that you will get, assuming you put your email address in properly. And then farther down on our page, also, you'll find the Discuss, DISQUS, the Discuss forum, where you can share ideas about the things that came to mind watching this presentation, or anything else that you see on our meeting page. You can respond to others. Obviously, this is something that we all like to see done in a friendly and uplifting way. So feel free to join in with that. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. So Theo, let me pass the mic back to you. What would you like people to be thinking about as they step away from this recording?
Started the presentation with the view into shipping, and sort of how, taking a look at how we are a part of this sort of interconnected world, and spent a lot of time talking about Cambium and what we're doing. I'd like to close with a little bit about my own interest and passion and how this aligns with what we're doing at Cambium in so many ways. And I think to build a more sustainable, more just world, we really have to think on a holistic level and look at these systems as an interconnected web, not just isolating and trying to analyze one or the other. And what gets me really excited about Cambium and what we're doing is the potential to change how people view products they interact with, things they buy, what they consume, our sense of place, and how we connect with the world around us in our local environment. The trees that sit outside our homes, what happens to them when they fall down and where they go, and adding a little bit of awareness and intention, even in my own life through this work. And I think that a big part of this, addressing the climate crisis, which is certainly what I view as one of my goals in life, is to reduce our consumption. What is truly necessary? What is both good for people and good for the planet? And believe that what we're doing at Cambium is something really exciting, and would love, at the very least, to take a walk around your neighborhood, look at a tree, learn the species, where it came from, the history there. I think it can be an amazing thing to take a moment to look outside your back window and connect with a little bit of nature. So thanks so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, and a great story to finish with. Everyone, we will see you next week.